All right, so porcupines can shoot their quills, but hedgehogs can't because hedgehogs have spines, but the spiny anteater, which is actually an echidna, not an anteater, doesn't have spines, has quills, but then the tenrec, which is sometimes has hedgehog in the name, isn't related to hedgehogs, but looks like a hedgehog, has smaller spines or spikes or quills or prickles, but it's related to the elephant or the aardvark, but not the hedgehog. It's another 10-Minute Tuesday here on Animals, Nature, and You. I'm your host, Rick Schwartz, and like many of the 10-Minute Tuesdays we've already had, this episode is inspired by the episode we just had last Thursday, an interview with Stephanie Arney. You don't have to listen to that interview if you haven't already to know about what we're going to talk about, but it helps. It gives you context as to how that episode inspired this one. In that episode, in that conversation with Stephanie Arney, we brought up porcupines. She shared a story about how she realized the importance and need for wildlife education because she saw how baby porcupine was being treated by people who had beliefs that porcupines could shoot their quills, do all sorts of damage, a lot of fear-based beliefs around a myth, when the truth is they can't shoot their quills. Quills of a porcupine are just a modified hair. So how does that myth come about? Well, in today's episode, I want to talk about quills and spines and the different mammals that have these things and how they got their names and which one means which, or is the name interchangeable? So let's start with the North American porcupine. The North American porcupine's quills are very shallow-rooted hairs, or a modified hair. In fact, all quills or spines in mammals are a modified hair growing out of a root follicle, some deeper than others, and the modification of that hair is different depending upon the species. For the North American porcupine, the quill is loosely rooted. It's a very shallow root. If you were to look at the quill, the quill. I've been reading up on so many different things about quill and spine. I might have got that mixed up. If you look at the quill, the majority of it looks like a nice long needle, and the very little end that is not the pokey, stabby end, the end that goes into the animal is a very shallow root follicle made of keratin, just like our hair. If you hold the quill by the root and run your fingers towards the tip, you would feel very rough, jagged edges. These are the microscopic barbs or hooks. They're not true hooks. They're more like a barb, if you will, because the way the quill grows. Think of tightly laid shingles with sharp edges. And so as you run from the root towards the tip, it would hook and pull. So when the quill goes into the animal that's trying to attack it, the dog that's trying to sniff it, whatever it might be, the quills easily sink in there super, super sharp. In fact, studies done show that it is sharper than and goes into the flesh easier than an 18-gauge needle, which you would use for a hypodermic needle for like a vaccine or a shot. Needle, same size as the quill goes in easier. The thing is, those shingles or those hooks, the barbs, if you will, they anchor it in there. And so as the animal pulls away from the poke or the stab or the jab, the root follicle is so shallow, it comes out very easily. Again, this is a North American porcupine to just give us some context here, some ground rules about what we're talking about with the quill. Now, here's a fun fact for you. If you know somebody who has hair much longer than mine, so long hair, if you hold it by the root and run one direction and run the other, you'll feel on the human hair, because the way the hair grows, there's a rough direction and a smooth direction, depending upon which way you go. So fun little fact for you. So if quills and spines on mammals are a modified hair made of keratin, we know the North American species has those barbs or hooks or the layers that create the ability for it to sink in very easily. What about all the other ones out there? What about the spiny anteater? What about, also known as echidna, what about the hedgehog, the tenrec? What about the old world porcupines, the crested porcupines? Everybody's a little bit different. It's interesting. I've had the great pleasure of working with North American porcupines and also crested porcupines and echidnas and hedgehogs and tenrecs. Not all of the many different species out there, but some of each kind as far as the tenrecs, hedgehogs, and all those guys. Here's what I know from my personal experience. When I first got into wildlife education, I'm working with these animals, the question came up, are they spines or are they quills? Is it interchangeable? I did some research, and let me rephrase that. Scientific research is very different than just looking stuff up. I looked some stuff up in a lot of different resources of scientific research that was already done, and I looked at that information, came away with the fact that a quill is considered hollow, where a spine is considered solid. So one extreme would be if you take a North American porcupine quill, cut it with scissors, you would see it looks like a straw inside. This gives it a lot of strength when being poked, but it can be bent pretty easily if you take it tip to tip and bend it. You look at the echidna, if they shut out a quill or a one of their spines, depending upon what you want to call it, and cut it in half. It's very almost like styrofoam inside. There's a core to it, but it's spongy. If you take a hedgehog quill or spine and you cut it, it is solid. So by the definitions done by scientists that came along much earlier than me, the quill of a North American porcupine and the quill of a crested porcupine, the quill of a echidna, and then the spine of a hedgehog and the spine of a tenrec. So that goes into the tenrec and the hedgehog, although not related. They have grown quills or spines that are solid. They're shorter and very strong. They are deeper rooted. They don't come out easily. They don't have the ability to come out like the other quills do on a porcupine. Tenrecs, interestingly enough, some species, theirs are so deeply rooted into certain muscle tissue, they can vibrate them to create sound. The hedgehogs, in general, don't lose their quills. And although hedgehogs and tenrecs are not related, they use their spines. They use their spines in a very similar manner in balling up to protect themselves. And instead of those sharp, pokey, stabby, keratin-based modified hairs coming out to poke into and stay into the predator, they're just a really hard thing to open up that doesn't really feel very good to chew on or paw at. So hopefully the predator leaves them alone. Whereas the North American porcupine, like we discussed earlier, their quills will come out and embed in the face of that animal, trying to sniff them or bite them or grab them or at a paw. So if you've ever had a dog come home with quills in its face, it looks like they were shot. Two reasons for this. The long hairs of a North American porcupine are guard hairs. They act like whiskers. So when a dog comes up to sniff them, dogs like to identify things by sniffing. Dog comes up to sniff them, the porcupine's going to feel that and jump towards what's touching it, forcing the quills into that face. The dog pulls away, the face full of quills that are now embedded and very hard to get out. And if the dog doesn't learn its lesson the first time, it decides to go in for a second sniff, it's just going to happen again. Or then the paws, they start to do this, trying to get the quills off their face. If you're not watching on YouTube, what I just did was basically moving my hands in front of my face, trying to get the quills off the face and off the muzzle. They can embed some of those quills into their forelimbs, again, giving more of that illusion that it was shot out of the animal, out of the porcupine into the dog. Now, we talk about the much bigger crested porcupines. These are old world porcupines, and there are a lot of different species of porcupines out there. They are rodents. There's all sorts of different kinds across Africa, and India, Asia, Europe, here in North America, even South America as well. And everyone's quills are a little bit different, but I've worked with the crested porcupines. They're interesting in that they have modified hairs that are very long to give them a crest that are stiffer than a standard hair. It would be like if you put a lot of gel in your hair and slicked it back. But they have the ability to move those to make themselves look bigger. And same with the quills of their lower part of their body. They have the longer guard ones, but underneath are the really stabby ones. Their quills, depending upon where it's located on their body, can be like a very sharpened pencil, or it could be almost blade-like, like a saber, where I've seen some that are ridged and sharp and come to a flat tip. So again, going into that animal to defend itself, a leopard, a lion, something like that, hyena, those are going to go in deep into that powerful, strong flesh of that animal. So it's interesting to see how these different adaptations for this quill/spine, depending upon what species you're talking about. So again, for a quick review, we tend to call quills in the biological, zoological world, quills tend to be hollow, where spines tend to be solid. That middle fuzzy ground is the echidna, also known as a spiny anteater. Most stuff I looked up right now, most zoologists consider their modified hair that's sharp at the end to be a quill. Even though it's filled with spongy material, they consider that hollow in comparison to the hedgehog or tenrec, which is solid, almost like a nail, if you will, where it's that thick keratin all the way through. I'll let you decide, or maybe you know more than I do. If you work with porcupines, echidnas, tenrecs, hedgehogs, you tell me. Leave a message here on YouTube in the comments or reach out to me on social media. There'll be a post on all of my social media about this episode, so you can engage there if you know more or have questions about quills versus spines when it comes to mammals. And of course, sometimes we use the word quill. We talk about the shaft of a feather of a bird, quill pen, that hollow tip. Spines sometimes in different marine life. The sea urchin has spines. So there's different things. And then the horticulture world, the botanical world. Any botanical friends out there? There's thorns, there's spines, there's spikes, there's all sorts of stuff, isn't there? not my realm at all. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. And of course, I want to thank you. I appreciate you joining me on this curious odyssey of animals, nature, and you. And I want to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe or hit follow wherever you're listening or watching the podcast, because I don't want you to miss any upcoming episodes. As you know from listening to this one, every Tuesday we have short solo episodes with fun facts or something interesting that came up or something that might be topical in the moment. And then every Thursday, we have an interview with a new guest doing awesome things, and we get to find out what those awesome things are, how they got started, and how maybe you can join, be a part of it, or be inspired to do your own awesome thing. I also want to remind you real quick, Animals, Nature, and You is on Instagram. You can follow along there, updates of upcoming episodes and things happening there. You can engage, ask questions, whatever it might be. And of course, all my social media and my links are down below. Essentially, Zoology Rick, just about everywhere I am on social media, or zoologyrick.com. All right. Have a good one, everybody.